Lloyd Vance's Insider Football is back on 1029 The Game and the Coastal Sports Network. So glad everybody can join us this evening. I'm here with my tag team partner, Kevin Midgette. We're so excited everybody can be with us and lots to talk around the National Football League. Week 11, we're starting to find out who the pretenders are, the contenders, who's getting ready for the draft, possibly the playoffs, and we finally saw the Chiefs get knocked off. How you doing, Kevin? How you doing this evening?
Doing well, thanks. Glad to be back finally. We're starting to get into the thick of things with the playoffs starting to line up a little bit, the seedings and everything else. And you're right, the imposters are falling way down to the wayside.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we're going to look at my early predictions from way back before the season started and see where we are with all them. But we're going to look at the different games. And of course, I got to start with the team you and I both follow, the Philadelphia Eagles. I covered them for a number of years, and I know you're a super fan. They win Thursday night, and all along I said, all right. Even last week, and I had Nate on. I was like, I just don't know if these guys are for real, who they've been playing. But they get their sixth straight win, 26-18 over Washington. I think a little of it has to do with Washington is a young team, but they're not there yet. They're kind of ahead of schedule, fighting for that last wild card spot. But I think it's clearly the Eagles division in the NFC East. What are you seeing in terms of the Philadelphia Eagles at this point?
Well, I think you're definitely right with Washington. They seem like they were the not ready for primetime players. They've had some success, but to put them on the national stage like that, I think it was a learning experience for them, most definitely. Playing on the road didn't help them at all. The Eagles, on the other hand, they're the ones where I kind of am just like, they're winning the games they should win. They're not losing these games. But with the exception of maybe one game, they're not putting 4 quarters of football together. You play a better, more elite team, a playoff team. You think you can go play the Detroit Lions and roll over for a half and then try to backdoor them on the fourth quarter? It's not going to happen. And to this day, I will be shocked, absolutely shocked, if Nick Sirianni doesn't do something boneheaded in the playoffs to cost them a game.
And that's the thing. Everybody's always going to question Sirianni. Last year of his contract, and he's always sticking his chest out, so boastful. We're going to get to coaches on the hot seat. Maybe we'll talk about him in a minute in terms of that. But yeah, you wonder about X's and O's. Is he going to foul this thing up, particularly in the playoffs where these games matter? And everybody's saying, "Oh, Lloyd, you don't do your power rankings anymore. Where would you put the Philadelphia Eagles?" And as you were talking about Detroit, I have to firmly put them behind them. You look at what Detroit did to the Jacksonville Jaguars, just destroying them 52-6 this week and making a total laugher. In the Eagles, it took a N'Kobe Dean interception right at the end of that game to seal that victory against Jacksonville. So 6 straight wins for the Philadelphia Eagles. A lot of people are saying put them in that mix, that conversation. Um, I I'll buy in a little. You know what I mean? If it's a stock, I'll go conservative. I'm not going all in on them. And a big thing, obviously, is the teams they've beaten. The teams they've beaten have a combined record of 29-48. Um, you did see Green Bay win, New Orleans win, but there were a lot of 2-8 teams that they've beaten, and you see the Bengals kind of fall off, and you're like, okay, where is this? And Dallas, how about them? The game tonight, I think Dallas, this will be the nail in their coffin in their season. Obviously, Cooper Rush playing for them. I think the Texans are going to take care of business. What do you think in terms of Dallas?
Dallas was done a couple weeks ago. Even before the Dak injury, I thought Dallas was done. They just don't have it. The fact that McCarthy's there still is kind of mesmerizing in some way. But who's winning with this team with the injuries they did have on defense and the situation they went to in the offseason with Dak and his contract and everything else? It was just a whole cauldron of just, malcontents at that point. There wasn't anything I didn't think Dallas was going to do this year. It's it's not going to hurt my feelings. I'll sleep well at night. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, and Jerry Jones just doesn't get it. He still wants to be a general manager. Obviously, McCarthy's going to be let go at the end of the season, but he's probably going to come back as general manager. He thinks he still can draft guys. They've signed. They have C.D. Lamb signed. They have Dak Prescott given the highest contract to any quarterback. He's not going anywhere. Now you wonder about Micah Parsons. if they're smart, if I'm Dallas, I'm shopping Michael Parsons because he could possibly get three number ones for him. It's sort of like a Khalil Mack type of deal, and maybe they can rebuild around it. But you just can't trust Jerry Jones as the architect of this situation. And now Cooper Rush is starting. They're obviously tanking. And I asked Nate this last week. Do you really think that Dion could come there with his son? I just think with Jerry Jones and his meddlesome ways, that just is a disaster waiting to happen.
Oh, I hope it happens. And I've said it before in the show. I want Jerry Jones to live to be 120 in control of the Dallas Cowboys. I'm cool with that. If Dion takes that Cowboys job, I want to see it play out. It'll be good for the media folk, to have something to talk about. That's for sure. But can he succeed with that team the way it's orchestrated right now? Not at all. And the one thing with Michael Parsons I want to put out, he seems like a guy who's already setting himself up for life after football. He's very involved in his podcast. He's very involved in doing media type things. I don't know how much of there is a desire to play in Dallas for him anymore. He wants to get paid, but I don't know if he wants to be in Dallas.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting because he wants, and he probably should be close to the highest non quarterback out there. So you're talking, upwards of $30 million, and then with that salary cap, even though it's probably going to go up next season, that's just way too much to have in three players, and their biggest problem, as I said, they don't have those the backups, the second tier guys, the special teams guys, other than their kicker who can help this lineup. So the Cowboys are in big trouble. I think tonight Houston's going to put it on them in their own stadium. Um, Speaking of their stadium, I want to get your take on this. Angel and I were talking on it off air. I know this is a football show, but all guys our age, we watched it. We watched it, and Mike Tyson, I told everybody in my house, I was like, he's a almost 60-year-old grandfather. He's not going to win. And everybody was getting mad at me and saying, every old man's got a punch. But it reminded me of those commercials with Emmett Smith and Jerry Rice and Dan Marino. Oh, I want to come back and play. And you saw he was not ready for prime time. What you think of the fight?
I think it was great the fact that everyone who had Netflix could watch it. You didn't have to pay these 50 to 100, $150 fees to watch it. So that was cool. I am a huge believer in conspiracy theories. And I've been watching the breakdown of all these moments. And when Tyson has him is clenched up with Paul the one time after he hit Paul hard, Paul's saying something to him in his ear. Tyson taps him on the back like, okay, I get it. Pull back a little bit. If you watched any of Mike's little training sessions and all that, that guy was just standing in the middle of the ring. And they're like, oh, he's so old. Oh, no, he's not that old to sit there for 2 minute rounds. Jake Paul is a cash cow. They can't have that guy lose. I'm a conspiracy guy, but yeah, I grew up loving Mike. Well, I actually wanted Mike to lose at certain points, but everybody loves Mike now. So that was kind of hard to watch. I'll give you that.
Yeah, it was crazy because you're like, all right, you are one. Is it this WWE type scripted stuff? One of the guys here at my house, he had a betting app, and he's like, oh, well, let's put some money on it, and then we look and it's not on and you're from Pennsylvania, New York, there's like a bunch of states listed. You couldn't put money on that. You had to do some kind of weird parlay. So I'm like, okay, maybe Vince McMahon's behind the scenes. Who knows? It's just nuts. And I was saying to Angel, yeah, if he wants to fight his brother, no one's going to tune in for it, even if it's on Netflix. But like Nate told me, he's like, "Oh well, Paul's making bread. That's all that I guess that's what it's all about, because it was just kind of a farce. So I just wanted to get your take. Speaking of gambling and everything, here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, the Coastal Sports Network. This week, home teams were 8-5 in the National Football League heading into Monday night. The crazy thing was there was 9 covers. So most of the teams that they thought would win did. There was one outright loser, and that was the Pittsburgh Steelers over the Baltimore Ravens. That was a close game. We'll go over that one soon. And then you had a bunch in terms of the over unders. There were 8 over, so a lot of scoring around the league. Scoring is up, and in terms of that, before we get to the games, I wanted to talk with you, and we'll go over my predictions, and kind of we'll laugh about them, and you can say, well, if that's close, or if there's someone else that we should be thinking of. Offensive Rookie of the Year. going into this season, I thought it was Jaden Daniels' award. Right now, Caleb Williams is he's doing okay. You saw him play a little better this week, but the guy challenging Dean Daniels, in my opinion, is Bo Nix. I mean, Bo Nix, 14 touchdowns, passing, 4 rushing. Does have 6 interceptions, and he's running the ball pretty well too. 65% completion percentage. So, is offensive rookie of the year still Jaden Daniels award at the midway point or a little after?
Well, the one thing I will say is I think we were all missing the key that Bo Nix was going to be good in the NFL. I think we were all kind of just pushing him to the side a little bit. It's like, I don't know about that. The one guy I would throw in there that's a non-quarterback is Brock Bowers from the Raiders.
Yeah, how about him? Yes.
Tight end with 70 receptions already. What, do you have 13 the other day? I mean, he's balling out for a team that's not good at all.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I watched him all through college at Georgia, and I was like, well, that guy's a player, and he reminds me of a young Kelsey, the way he moves in space and everything, and he's come right in the league, and he's got great hands, and he's handcuffed, because he's got Gardner Minshew throwing a football, Aiden O'Connell, Desmond Ritter. The Raiders are probably one of the worst teams in the National Football League. They're going to be at the top of the draft, so yeah, I would throw Bowers in there, a couple other guys that Sir mentioned, Malik Neighbors. He had a couple concussion issues, but he's like the only guy in the Giants really worth watching. Surprisingly, Marvin Harrison Jr. has kind of gotten off to a slow start, but the Cardinals are playing very well at 6-4, leading the NFC West. So I think you got to mention him. And then Xavier Worthy, he's so fast. I mean, he played very well yesterday against Buffalo, and I'll throw him in there as well. So offensive rookie, that's a fun one to watch. Defensive rookie of the year, I have a lot to. Uh, from the Indianapolis Colts and UCLA, he does have 3 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. He's doing okay. Um, there are a couple other guys though. The LA Rams, Jared Verse is playing very well, and the Eagles are going to get to see him this week coming up. Teron Arnold for Detroit. Detroit's playing so well, 9-1. You got to throw somebody in there, but he does get a lot of penalties. And then, got to mention this as the Eagles guy. I know everybody's going to say Cooper Jean, but it's Quinyon Mitchell. I mean, he's shutting people down. I know he's playing some receivers that aren't the best sometimes, but he did a great job being on Jamar Chase. He has to work on his hands. He has a couple interceptions he dropped, but talk to me about defensive rookie of the year and what do you think about Quinyon Mitchell?
Well, one also name I want to add for offensive one is Brian Thomas Jr. for Jacksonville.
Oh yeah, I forgot about him.
He's having a good year, and he's got that stiff Mac Jones trying to give him the ball, and he's still getting a little bit of production out of it. Quinyon Mitchell, that's my pick out of it, to be honest. He, in the next couple of years, especially if he can develop the fact he can intercept the ball, that guy's a glove. He sticks with guys, and you can say a lesser receiver, Jamar Chase. It doesn't matter. He hangs on their hip. He's with them. He's got all the talent. There's no doubt.
Yeah, great, and he's out of Toledo. I mean, that was a great pick, and you see Cooper Jean coming along. He's in a slot position. I think eventually they may think about moving to Jean to the free safety. Blankenship is kind of a fill-in guy. He gets a pick here and there, but I think he may can get more snaps at that position. And I've killed Howie over the years in terms of his drafting, but they were 2 very good picks at the top of the draft for the Philadelphia Eagles, and that's the other reason why. Okay, yeah, the Eagles last year 10-1, and they kind of fell apart. But at 8-2, you got to say they're a contender right now for that NFC conference because other than Detroit, there's some other teams, but Minnesota's 8-2, but I think the Eagles are a better team than them. You saw what they just did to Washington, and then they beat Green Bay at the beginning of the season. So NFC. I still say it's Detroit and then a step down, but the Eagles, I say, are right there.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely, and especially we didn't take into consideration the fall off from San Francisco. We thought maybe they had 1 year left of this window to make their Super Bowl run for the last time before contracts come up and everything else. But I mean, they're just starting to fade a little bit.
They are, and they hung around and played a tough game, and Seattle ended up winning that one late, and we'll go over that one. But there's just something amiss with them, and Bosa was playing at a high level in this game, and then when he came out, you saw Seattle storm back and score all 20 of their points when he was on the field. So the injuries have hit them hard. McCaffrey is back, but they don't have Brandon Ayuk, Debo Samuel. is not playing very well. Their offensive line is a little beat up, and they didn't have Kittle this week. So, yeah, and I kind of thought, okay, yeah, they're not going to. I had them not making the playoffs this year, and it's sort of looking like that. So, yeah, and this Lloyd, this is Insider Football here on 102.9 The Game, Coast Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. We're going over my early season picks for awards and division winners, and we're going to have a good laugh at it because we're right a little above the halfway point. I just want to get Kevin's opinion on some of these. We already talked about Offensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year. Now, this is an interesting one. I I said Justin Jefferson. He's right there. He's probably 1A receiver, but right now I'd have to say Jamar Chase is doing better than him. You got to throw him in that mix. Amon-Ra St. Brown. But the guy I think, and I'm going to get your opinion on this, speaking of the Eagles, Saquon Barkley is just playing at a crazy level. That Offensive Player of the Year is looking like his award.
I agree with you entirely. And the fact is, if they didn't do so many tush pushes and Jalen taking the ball himself into the end zone, you give him like 4 or 5 more touchdowns. We're talking the MVP of the whole league because we know it's a quarterback award. But that's the kind of year and how impressive he's been. And without Saquon Barkley, where is that team right now? And everyone has to have that one moment. Remember, like the Heisman's when Desmond Howard did the Heisman thing after getting the touchdown. Flutie throws his Hail Mary. That backwards spin move, matrix move that Saquon made sticks in people's brain. That's burnt. You will. I've been watching football for close to 50 years. I've never seen anything like that. So he has that signature moment as well. I believe, no doubt, he's the offensive player of the year.
Yeah, and the thing is, Kevin, he busted that game open against Washington on Thursday. It was close, and then he had those 2 long touchdown runs, just explosive, and he's carrying his team. Jalen Hurts, as you said, his job's a lot easier, and I think it's better for him where he's throwing the football about 25 times a game, leaning on Saquon Barkley, and the Eagles have some great weapons. Offensive line seems to be coming together. The thing is, Sirianni's a big question mark. Saquon 197 rushes for 111.37, 8 touchdowns, 5.8 yards per carry, 23 receptions on 29 targets, 210, and 2 touchdowns receiving ball. So he's making a lot of plays. The only thing you have to worry about, he may have close to 375 touches at the end of the season. And we know the only 2 seasons he's played fully was his rookie season of 2018 and 2022. He played all the games. So, do you worry about Saquon wearing down and should Kellen Moore look to somebody else?
Most definitely. I believe we talked about it before the season even started. Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry were those guys that you did not want to give the ball too many times to early, the midway part of the season, because you wanted to have them for the playoff run and everything else. And both those guys are touching the ball way more than I think anyone planned on them touching it. But at the same time, I mean, I get it. You got Saquon for these years. But a franchise that's only won one Super Bowl, do you just throw it all in and try to get it right now? I I don't know how to answer that right now. But at the same time, Saquon, if he keeps touching the ball this many times, something's bound to happen, law of averages. And you just don't want to be the back end of December going into the playoffs.
Yeah, and sometimes you do hold his breath. I know he came out not this week, but the week before he kind of came off for a play or two, and you do worry about that physicality. He is 27, but I think with the schedule coming up, the Eagles are going to try to give Gainwell some opportunities. So they're at the Rams, at Baltimore. They have Carolina, Pittsburgh, at Washington, Dallas, and then the Giants to end the season. So Saquon's going to have his opportunities. And speaking of Derrick Henry, you can't talk about the season without him. Yesterday, obviously, Ty Monken did not get the ball to him enough. I think he only had 13 rushes. But Henry, I think he's just a shade ahead of Barkley in terms of yardage. Talk about the resurgence of the running back position. And, Henry, everybody said it's washed and everything. I'm real happy because he's the bell cow of my fantasy football team. He gets, my son's like touchdown anytime for him. I think he's had about 8 straight games where he's gotten a touchdown. So, talk about Derrick Henry and his resurgence as we're talking about offensive player of the year.
Yeah, it's almost, even on paper, it's like that was a perfect fit. A team that likes to run the ball, who's had running back injury problems like Baltimore. Oh, let's get Derrick Henry, who's basically run them over and kicked them out of the playoffs on his own. So the fact they acquired Derrick Henry, that was a perfect fit for them. And it is true though. It's like the running back position seemed to be like it was fading away the last couple of years, and it's had this like renaissance now that people are actually starting to run the ball again and get production out of the running backs.
Yeah, and we'll see if they're able to carry it and keep it going, and maybe we'll start seeing some of these backs get contracts. We saw the Eagles; they took the chance with Saquon Barkley, and now you're seeing even Carolina Panthers re-sign Chuba Hubbard. Now the interesting when that was signed, they signed him immediately. I'm like, okay, what about Miles Sanders, a guy who just has not lived up to expectations, and um, they're going to kind of move forward without him. Speaking of the Panthers, they were on a bye, but they have a 2 game winning streak, which is surprising. And when you talk about the upcoming draft, it's looking more and more like the Jacksonville Jaguars may have the first overall pick. They're 2-9. You have Cleveland in there, 2-8. The Raiders 2-8. Tennessee 2-8. Giants 2-8. So they're the top five right now in terms of the draft. Who do you see getting that first pick, and is it going to be a quarterback?
I think they're all going to take quarterbacks. The quarterback position on all those teams are terrible. I mean, you got Danny Dimes basically trying to they're going to try to bench him the rest of the year because if I saw correctly, they don't owe him as far as money goes now, the guaranteed. But if he plays and gets injured, there's like a 23, $25 million clause he has out there. So Tommy Cutlets now is going to get out there and they're going to quarterback him for a little bit. So you got guys who are just. I mean, think about it this way: if you're Dallas, what do you get out of playing Cooper Rush? Play Trey Lance, see if he can play. You made this deal for him. Why don't you get him out there?
Yeah, I was just saying that last week to Nate. I was like, they might as well check him out because he is on last year's contract. See what he can do. Made a trade for him, and they gave us some stuff to get him from San Francisco. Why not take a look at him? And you're right, the Giants is crazy because you got Tommy Cutlets coming in. Tommy DeVito is going to be the quarterback, and we're going to see what he can do. I think, you know, it's going to get ugly for the Giants quick, and they're going to have a new coach, probably a new GM. Joe Douglas is probably in trouble. The GM there, Brian Dable, the head coach, and they're going to have to move forward now. The interesting name is obviously Shador Sanders. I think he's a solid quarterback, but I think the Raiders, that could be a landing spot for him. But I think Dion probably is going to go. His father's probably going to go back to either Colorado or go to Florida State before an NFL team because NFL owners like so much control over their head coach. I just don't know how that's going to, his act would wear it thin with some of these owners.
I think it would be a perfect landing spot for Florida State for him. He's proven he can go to Colorado. He proved he can recruit. He can get guys there. Florida State is in shambles right now. So the bar's not set too high for him if he goes there.
Yeah. Here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football, here on 1029 The Game, the Coast Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. Uh, we're going to get to the games of Week 11 in a minute, including the formerly unbeaten Chiefs losing, but a couple more. We want to look at a couple of these awards real quick from the beginning of the season and see if how close I was. Now, comeback player of the year. I said Aaron Rodgers. Boy, was I wrong on this one. He has been awful. Um, right now, I don't, you know, do you give it to Darnold? I'm just not sure. With comeback play of the year, it's sure not going to be Aaron Rodgers the way the Jets are playing. What do you think about that award?
I mean, for Sam Darnold, he's probably going to take this team to the playoffs. And before the season, who would have thought that Sam Darnold's going to take a team to the playoffs? So you kind of got to give credit where credit is due right there. Aaron Rodgers is the question. I believe he has one more year left on that deal with the Jets,
Yeah.
and he turns 41 in 2 weeks. Do you just cut ties after this year? It's like, you know what? I think we're done here.
Yeah, and Woody Johnson, who knows? He may be an ambassador again. His son Chris Johnson's going to probably be running the Jets, and you wonder if he wants to go down that road and give Aaron Rodgers the keys to the kingdom like they did. I say they're going to start anew, get a new quarterback, get all his cronies out of there. They have a record 30 guys on the last year of their contract there, so it's going to be a completely different team. I know Jets fans will be happy. It was funny because I was watching a game yesterday. They had the paper bags out, like the old Saints, and, and you feel bad for them. I remember in Philadelphia here, covering the team Andy Reid's last season when I forget what they finished. It was something awful, and fans were just besides themselves. And you wonder, it takes a special fan to keep supporting their team and show up week after week when they're given that direct.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, if you look back, it's like when Aaron Rodgers got hurt the first week of the season, the Jets, their season was basically obliterated at that point. It's like, oh, all right, you got him for a full year. Now what do you think? Just as bad. It's like, and the thing is, he has weapons there. His problem is he almost is his own worst enemy because he doesn't want to throw interceptions. That's always been his MO. He's never really turned the ball over. And he doesn't make that pass to even try to give Garrett Wilson or Devontae Adams to try to go up and make a play. And that's kind of his downfall.
Yeah, and he has Adams there, and Wilson is a really good young receiver. He had a tough week this week. Didn't put up a lot of points, and Brees Hall had a really nice game. So I say they should move on from Rodgers. He definitely not. He was prohibitive comeback player of the year, but that's not happening. Uh, MVP. Let's talk about this one now. I had it as Jared Goff. He had an amazing week this week. Jumping back into the mix. He had 5 interceptions the week before and still won the game. But I definitely got to say, at this point, and after how he played yesterday, we'll go over that in a minute. Josh Allen has got to be the MVP leader in the clubhouse.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I mean, depending on how Buffalo finishes up their season, if they don't pull an Eagles from last year or something like that, I mean, I think it's Josh Allen's award right now. I don't foresee them trying to give the award, I should say, rather to Lamar Jackson at this point. I mean, is there a case if Russell Wilson runs out, even though he had a bad game, but they won? I mean, do you start thinking about him a little bit if they close out, say they didn't lose the rest of the season, to be like, oh, Russ. But it's Josh Allen at this point, I believe.
Yeah, and he has 18 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions, which was always his biggest problem. He has 316 rushing yards and 5 TDs on the ground. So, he's carrying his team. Huge victory. We'll get that in a minute. And yeah, he's definitely a leader in the clubhouse there. Wanted to get your take though. Some of the Philadelphia area. One of my this guy drinks the green Kool Aid. He's like, well, what about Jalen Hurts? Shouldn't he be in a conversation for MVP? And yes, he has a lot of total touchdowns, and you touched on that tush push earlier. And how much credit should he get for his tush push touchdowns or the offensive line? So I think Hurts, nice, productive play, but I can't put him in the MVP conversation above. Even Joe Burrow has very good numbers this season. We talked about Josh Allen and even some of the non quarterbacks. It's a quarterback award. You got to look at what Jamar Chase is doing, and obviously Saquon.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I mean, just to throw it out there, you could have a playful argument about it. Is Jalen Hurts even the MVP on the Eagles? It's like it's one of those things. You got Saquon. How's this team without Saquon? How's it different? You took AJ Brown off that
Yes.
team. What happened there? Calcaterra was your leading wide receiver, I believe, one game. So I mean, it's a different dynamic. You take Jalen though, and your backup's Kenny Two Gloves though. Then you look at it that way. I just think there's too much. There's too much competition. It's like saying like a movie nominated for best actor or something like that, or supporting actor, and two or three people from the same movie are in there. It's like you can't differentiate, so you go another direction.
Yeah, and I think it's for the better of Jalen Hurts that he's not. He's in the car, he's not driving it, and too often when he puts that pressure on himself. You talked about that 10-1 start last season and then losing 6 of the last 7 games. I think a lot of times he tried to force passes, particularly AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, and he's more relaxed. He's cutting down on his interceptions. The team's on a 6-game hot streak, and yeah, he's leaning on that offensive line. You got to give them their flowers as well. And then Saquon, we talked about him, and then the receiver combo's doing well. Before we move on to the other games, I wanted to get the Eagles' defense. Is this defense have teeth? Everybody's saying, well, they've beat up on a lot of these teams, and are allowing less than about 17 points per game in a 6-game winning streak. One of the best units in the National Football League. I think Zach Bond's playing very well. The defensive secondary we talked about with DeJean, Soleil's kind of picking up his play. The defensive line, though, I just don't know if they're getting enough pressure when they have a key game. Huff especially. he's been a non-factor. I think he has like 2 sacks already only.
The defense actually, it's one of those things. I didn't think they'd be playing as well as they are right now, but you take into consideration who they're playing. But at the same time, on the other end, I mean, these teams aren't scoring against them either. I mean, they're putting them in check. Washington was hanging numbers too. Let's not forget. And
Oh yeah.
The Eagles went and sat on them. Basically, the defense did to let that offense finally get to the fourth quarter where they could do something. So that defense has been hugely important for that team.
Yeah, and a lot, it comes to Vic Fangio, and I think they're letting the coordinators cook. They're letting Kellen Moore do his job, they're letting Fangio do his job, and then of course we say Sirianni, what's he doing? I mean, he got his haircut. He since he got his haircut to buy the team, the team's playing very well. So we'll see how the Eagles are doing, and we'll preview that game coming up with the Rams. We're here in Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coast Sports Network. All right, let's get to the slate of games from this week. It was a huge week around the National Football League, and so many good games to talk about. I'll start where you are with the Baltimore Ravens. What number one, are these two teams still fighting and pushing each other with each other? I mean, what a crazy game. The Steelers win 18-16 as the Ravens go for a 2-point conversion, can't get it done to tie the game. But the story of this game, obviously, is Chris Boswell, 6 field goals, including 3 from 50-yard plus. And then Justin Tucker. What's going on with him with the Ravens kicker? So talk to me a little bit about this game.
I'll start with the Justin Tucker thing. I mean, there's only so many kicks in a leg, and this guy has been killing it for 2 decades. And it's not so much even the missed field goals the last game. It started like the missed extra point the week before and things
Yeah.
like that. And it looks like it's starting to fall apart on him a little bit. But then again, Jake Elliott, he's a lot younger and didn't look so swell on Thursday either. So there were some missed kicks there. I don't know if and there was also Minnesota kicker missed an extra point. I mean, it was just some sloppy kicking this week, that's for sure. Baltimore Pittsburgh. The one thing I love it when teams, it's a division game and they don't like each other and they kick it old school like that. And you could tell these teams don't like each other. So it's kind of enjoyable throwback football to watch.
Yeah, and Baltimore, they're 1-8 in their last 9 against Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh has their number, and I don't know if Tomlin and Austin, the defensive coordinator, what they're designing against Lamar, because he's 1-4 versus them. They're shutting him down, and he did not have lanes to run, and they were harassing him early and often. I think the Steelers just have the athletic enough linebackers like Patrick Queen, who made a very nice fumble rip, and then he recovered as well to kind of hang with the weapons that the Ravens have. And we talked about earlier, Derrick Henry only had 13 rushes for 65 yards in the TD. So, good win for the Steelers. Russell Wilson was efficient, but they're 2 games ahead of Baltimore right now. Do they have enough lead in the AFC North?
Also, one thing I want to throw out, I don't know if you saw it, TJ Watt blew up Derrick Henry on this one rushing attempt, too. He came untouched from across the field and just laid him out. Derrick Henry's not a small guy either. So that was quite the car crash impact on that one. Pittsburgh is playing very well with Russell Wilson there. And you kind of almost have to add them into that Buffalo Kansas City mix. They're laying back, but they're playing very well right now.
Yeah, their 5th straight win, and the terrible towels were out there, and they forced 3 turnovers in this game, and obviously that was the key. And defensively, they're just flying around, and then conversely, uh, the Ravens' defense is just not what it used to be. Man, they're I think they're like 31 or 32nd in terms of total yards allowed, and teams are moving the football on them. Kyle Hamilton's been banged up a lot this season. He's kind of the linchpin on their defense, and we'll see if they're able to get it together. Steelers 8-2, Ravens now 7-4. The Baltimore's going to be in a bye. They're trying to fix things up, and then they have the Chargers on Monday Night Football in a couple weeks. Steelers, they're going to get another layup. I know it's another divisional game, but they're at Cleveland. That's on Thursday night. So good quality win for the Steelers. Obviously, they want to get more touchdowns, though, than 6 field goals. That's the second time this season 6 field goals won them. And they're going to need touchdowns in when it matters most in the playoffs. Speaking of touchdowns, and this was a crazy game. The Lions are now 9-1. Jacksonville Jaguars come to Detroit, and they were the homecoming game. I mean, this was embarrassing. 2-9 now. The Jaguars 52-6, allowed 645 total yards. The Lions scored on every single possession. And what I want to ask you is, in terms of this game, is the Eagles' former head coach Dougie P, is he going to survive this bye week, or is Shad Khan going to be asleep at the wheel? Let him continue, because right now they've lost 14 of their last 17 games to Jaguars.
I'm at the point right now. When they were in London and they won that game, if they would have lost that, I think Dougie wasn't making the flight back from London with them. I thought he was going to get fired then, but they pulled out the W. It's almost like he's doing the Dougie goodbye tour, like every city he goes to. It's like, this is it. That team seems checked out. I don't care if it is Mac Jones back there or not. I mean, the team, literally, if you let someone score on you every possession, is this team really showing up to play, or are they just cashing checks?
Doing hook and laterals, and I was like, man, Dan Quinn kicked a field goal when they were up. They already scored 49 points. They kicked the field goal, but the Lions are so dangerous. You talk about weapons. We talked about the Eagles' weapons earlier. But I think in this game is 8 straight game with touchdown, and then they're 1-2 punch in the backfield. I think it's what Sonic and Knuckles, Sega back in the day. I don't know if you played that,
Oh,
but
yeah.
Montgomery had 15 rushes, 75 yards, 2 TDs, and Amir Gibbs, he had 69 yards rushing and a TD, and that he had a 54-yard reception where you couldn't even see his legs moving. The guy is a blur. I mean, this Lions team is so dangerous, and do you think they're going to be able to keep it going and have the road in the NFC go through the Detroit?
Absolutely. I see no reason why they would be derailed at this point. If you look at that game, pardon me, Sam Laporta was out of the game. They didn't even have their starting tight end. And the wild card for them is Jamison Williams. He had a big day for them, big, huge touchdown. And if you get him going as well with that offense, they're hard to stop. I mean, if you have to go to Detroit as well to play on the road, that's not going to be an easy place with the noise to play.
Yeah, and Detroit, their schedule is they're at Indianapolis, Chicago, Green Bay, Buffalo, at Chicago. Then they host the Niners in a much anticipated game on a Monday night, week 17, and they finish with Minnesota. So some tough games. We're going to see if they're able to keep it going. And when you look at the Eagles' schedule, I think the Eagles could definitely, because they got some winnable games. In it, obviously they're at the Rams, at Baltimore. Those are going to be tough, but they have Carolina, Pittsburgh. We'll see about that game. At Washington, they just handled them. Dallas, and then the Giants. So it's going to be a race to the finish between those two teams, and don't forget about Minnesota as well. We'll talk about them in a minute. But yeah, great win for the Lions, and they're looking like they could be, you know, top team or number 2 in the National Football League. So big win for them here on Lloyd Vance Inside Football here on 102.9 The Game. Coast Sports Network, Kevin, Midgette, and I are looking at the Week 11 games. Speaking of the Vikings, we probably won't spend a lot of time on this one. The Vikings are now 8-2. They just dominated Tennessee Titans, are 2-8. It was 23-13 in this one. Darnold had a very nice game in this one. 246, two touchdowns. He had a rushing touchdown. Addison got in the mix, and the Vikings take care of business. Are the Vikings for real, or they're a team are like, all right, everything's kind of falling their way?
I think it's a nice story. I think it's one of those a team you didn't really expect to do much and then make the playoffs. I think that's a good season for that team the way it's constructed right now. Do I think they're going to do any damage in the playoffs? Not really. No, I'm not convinced yet. I'll put it that way. I mean, to lean on Sam Darnold and see if he can air it out and win like a shootout, I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah, because last week, they win 12-7, and he played awful. And if it's any other team other than Jacksonville, they lose that game. So they're at Chicago. They have Arizona, which I think is going to be an interesting game. They have Atlanta, another interesting game. Chicago on a Monday night, at Seattle, Green Bay, at Detroit. So a lot of games where we're really going to find out who Minnesota really is, and if Sam Darnold's the answer. He does have Justin Jefferson to kind of lead on. Jacobs still has a little gas in the tank there. So good win for them. As I said, next week, Vikings are at Chicago. We'll get to them right now. It's about the oldest rivalry in the National Football League. The Packers squeak it out 20-19 over Chicago. Chicago moved the football. Caleb Williams looked a little better, but he's looking tentative. And he's talking about tipping your cap. I'll tip my cap to you because you kind of were like, Lloyd, I just don't know about this guy. He's solid. Obviously, they get rid of Shane Walter and the offense coordinator. Everybody's going to blame him, and they were a little bit better. But I think Eberflus is cooked in terms of just being a head coach. At the end, I couldn't believe. I was like, "What are you doing?" He was kind of running the clock down, and then the field goal they attempted was like, you know, uh, 48 yards. That's not an easy kick, and then it gets blocked at the end. The Packers survived, but at 7-3, you're starting to wonder, okay, if they're inconsistent ways, particularly at their quarterback Jordan Love, if this team is going to be able to compete with Detroit or where they're going to be in terms of playoff seeding.
Well, if it's like the old adage right there, because everyone was talking about, it's like, oh, they have like four wide receivers they can go to at any point. But if you have four wide receivers, do you even really have one? Need one solid, kind of spectacular receiver, and then the complementary pieces. And that they just have complementary pieces, it seems, right now. And Jordan Love, I don't think's identified who his favorite one of them is.
Yeah, and you have DJ Moore. He kind of stepped up, had a better game, and it was interesting because I left him on my bench. I was like, I was just tired of him not putting up numbers. But um, we'll see with them. The Bears are now 0-11 against Matt LaFleur led Green Bay Packers. So they just cannot get a win. Own the Bears, and it just seems that way. Um, Love had 13 of 17, 261, a touchdown, and an interception. Eberflus, and I think it's just a matter of time for him. Next up, you'll see San Francisco at Green Bay, a kind of prove it game coming up in week 12. And then you have Minnesota's at Chicago. That's a key divisional game as well. Bears have now lost their fourth straight game. Anything else on this team, or you think the Bears are just kind of keep moving along? If they get a high draft pick, they got to get an offensive lineman because that line is leaky, and you have Williams holding the ball way too long.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I mean, it's one of those teams. It's like, all right, we drafted our quarterback, and you have to give him a little bit of leeway there. The first season's kind of like to throw out a little bit. You want to see some progression in years 2 and 3. But if you don't protect him and get somebody in there and tell him how to get rid of the ball sooner and quicker, it's not like college where you can wait for this stuff to develop and move around. I mean, you're in a tough spot right there. So I agree with you. They have to get somebody to protect him.
Yeah, right now they're 4-6, and much like I talked about with Washington, maybe they're a little ahead of schedule where we thought they would be because we thought the Bears they may struggle with the young rookie quarterback. Most of the rookie quarterbacks, other than Bo Nix, are kind of struggling at this point in the season. So we're talking about Week 11 here in Lloyd Vance's Insider Football here on 102.9 The Game, Coastal Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. Uh, this game is interesting because the Eagles are going to play them in a minute coming up. The LA Rams go cross country and they beat the New England Patriots. I mean, you're talking about a 2-8 team in the Patriots. They beat them 28-22. But the key thing I saw in this game was that Stafford was looking good. I mean, at 295 yards passing, 4 TDs, no picks, and Cup and Nakua are really starting to heat up. You had Cup with 2 touchdowns and Nakua with a great diving catch TD. So I've had the Rams turn a corner. It's a topsy-turvy NFC West where everybody seems to be 5-5. Where do you think the Rams are after this game?
I think the Rams are a dangerous team. I think if everyone's healthy, that offense, I mean, they can move the ball. And I was even watching a little bit of the Rams game, and I was thinking, Matt Stafford has quietly put together a Hall of Fame career. If you look at his numbers from Detroit and then with the Rams, he has a Super Bowl and everything. It's like that guy's probably a Hall of Fame quarterback that's playing right now.
Yeah, and he's playing at a high level, and the other team, if he has the blocking and he has the time, he's able to get the football out of his hand. Kyron Williams had kind of a quiet game, 15 rushes, 86 yards. But the Rams, don't forget, they started 1-4. Now they're 5-5, and it's crazy in this division. It's going to probably come down to divisional wins, but they're second in that division to Arizona, another surprise team at 6-4. They're on a bye. Wanted to get your take on particularly talking about Arizona. Nate was like, "You make sure you ask Kevin what he thinks about Kyler Murray." He played very well in week 10. You know, can the Cardinals keep it going? I think they're having a nice stretch, but I think the Cardinals are going to come back to earth.
I Yeah, I mean, God bless Nate. He does love his Kyler Murray, though. I gotta give him a shout out for that one. He stands by his guy. Kyler Murray can put some nice games together, and the thing is, in that division, they're going to be in the mix if you just win a game here and there because no one's running away with it. But I think you need more out of Marvin Harrison Jr. He's showing signs right now, but he's not ready to be that number one takeover kind of guy. I mean, it might come eventually, but I think a lot of pressure was put on him with name recognition alone. I mean, they can move the ball. Do I see them winning that division? No. Do I see them winning a few more games? Sure.
Yeah, and early on, I had picked the Rams to win this division, and it's going to be a crapshoot because you have Seattle. It, it, it's just wide open that division, and as you said, other than Buda Baker on defense, I just don't see a lot there with the Cardinals, and they got holes on that team. James Conner is playing very well. So the Cardinals are at Seattle in week 12. That's going to be interesting after their bye. At Minnesota, Seattle again, New England at Carolina, at the Rams and San Fran. I think it may come down to those last 2 weeks in this division. And then, the winner of division will host a playoff game, probably in a wild card round, and then they may only get one team because they're probably all going to knock each other out of the playoff race, and we'll see whoever else is able to sneak in there, maybe like a Washington or somebody like that. All right, we talked about Bo Nix, and this was a great effort by him. Denver over Atlanta Falcons 38-16. The Falcons were my pick to win the NFC South. Both these teams are 6-5, but they seem to be headed in different directions. I'm not, the NFC South. It's interesting because Tampa was on a bye this week, and you wonder can they catch Atlanta because Atlanta has some holes. Good win by Denver, and Denver has a sneaky good defense. 4 sacks, 1 interception in this game, only allowed 6 points. Vance Joseph doing a good job with them, and Bo Nix is looking very efficient. So, what do you think about Denver's win here?
I just go back to when Sean Payton took that job in Denver. And a bunch of people were like, why would he take that job? He waited to take that job? And the fact it's like, and then Bo Nix goes there. It's like, that they still need a quarterback. What do I know? It's like he's doing well with Denver. Denver's an up and coming team. They're looking really good. And Bo Nix, he just makes me want to shut up when I say anything bad about him earlier in the season. He is showing out right now.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, he's an Oregon quarterback, and most of the Oregon guys they put up big college stats like Marcus Mariota, but when they get to the pros, they kind of don't have it, and he's playing very well. Mims and Sutton, they're making efficient catches and making big plays for him. Nix was 28 to 33, 307, 4 TDs, and he's rushing the football well. He definitely outplayed Cousins who you're wondering is he coming back down to earth, and Penix finished the game for him. It's going to be interesting to see where Atlanta goes from here. Obviously, that's a wide open division. Maybe the first one to 9-10 wins that wins that NFC South. And Atlanta, yeah, they still need to worry about Tampa Bay, who's on a bye. All right, next game we're talking about here in Lloyd Vance Inside Football on 102.9 The Game. Coast Sports Network is this was an exciting one because Seattle is now 5-5. They're over San Francisco is 5-5, 20-17 victory. But the key was, and my younger son Braden's like, Gino's going to blow it here. Well, Gino turned it around and showed everybody, okay, I'm a frontline quarterback. He runs for that rushing touchdown to seal this victory. The biggest story though had to be San Francisco as we were saying earlier, this is just not their something's amiss with this team, and is their window closing?
I think yes. I said before the season started, I thought they had one more chance, one more year to try to get it done, and it doesn't look like it's going to be this year. The guy I want to apologize to is Geno Smith. I think I've underestimated him. His whole resurgence in Seattle. It's like I keep waiting for the wheels to fall off. It's like this isn't real. This isn't real. He's done a nice job in Seattle. He really has.
Yeah, and the Seattle snaps a two-game losing streak, and they're doing a great job in terms of just hanging around. They have a good 1-2 punch with the receivers. Metcalf, Jackson Smith, and Jigma was one of my breakout players that I talked about at the beginning of the year, and he's really catching a lot of balls. Lockett's still around, and then of course, their thing is always their defense. But Witherspoon's playing very well for them. At Wolins, Witherspoon, and their secondary doing a great job for them, and they have a key game coming up this week. Arizona is at Seattle, so we'll see how it shakes out there. San Fran is at Green Bay. This is a kind of a prove it game. Both these teams have kind of been up and down, struggling. McCaffrey has been playing last couple weeks, but the burst just does not seem to be like it was last year. He had 19 rushes for 79 yards, and you got to wonder, Debo 4 catches for only 22 yards. Change is coming with San Francisco, and they're going to have to adapt to it. Purdy, they're going to have to pay him. He's playing pretty well. He had a nice rushing touchdown in this game, but the thing is, they need more, particularly defense. They have a lot of injuries, and much like you were saying, you got to start wondering if that window is closing on the Niners. All right, here's a big game, though. Here in Lloyd Vance Insider Football, we're going to touch down from Week 11. This was a great watch. I waited till the late window, and I was talking to Nate the whole day. He's like, I cannot wait for this game, and his Bills get their sixth straight win. They're now 9-2, their best record since 1992. The key play, obviously, is Josh Allen on 4th and 2. They say we're not we're not going to take the field goal and give it back to Mahomes. Allen sprints 26 yards, bowls over for a lot of guys into the end zone, looking like the MVP. Huge win for the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo over the Chiefs, handing them their first loss, 30-21. Allen's now 4-1 first loss. So does this mean a lot? What did you?
Well, as far as Buffalo goes, they needed that win more than Kansas City did, that's for sure. It's a confidence builder going down the road. If you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, though, they've Houdini'd themselves out of 4 losses. I mean, they're penalty flag here, block field goal there. I mean, they could easily have 4 or 5 losses right now. But the good teams, you know what they do? They find a way to win at the end. Buffalo, they needed this win going forward because they are going to probably have that matchup in the playoffs. So at least it's like, all right, we beat them after losing in Buffalo too before to them in the playoffs. It's nice to get that W against them.
Yeah, and they really don't want to go to Arrowhead. It's been a house of horrors for them.
Yeah.
Uh, Patrick Mahomes, is he still MVP candidate? It's kind of a down year. Yesterday, 23 of 33, 196, 3 TDs. He had 2 interceptions, particularly one to wrap, where it's like, where are you throwing the football? What's going on with Patrick Mahomes, and is this something that Chiefs fans should be worried about?
I don't think it's anything to be worried about. I think you're finding, though, sometimes when teams have had all the success that they've had with all the Super Bowls, it's hard to remain focused like that for the entire length of the season. It's like, sometimes it's not that you're phoning it in by any means, but the concentration, you're going to try something else. You're going to try behind the back passes to Travis Kelsey in certain situations. And, it's just like, I don't. If I'm a Kansas City fan, I'm not worried. I think Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes, they're at the point. It's like none of this really matters. We've got our wins right now. We're going to get our playoff positioning. Do you want home field advantage? Absolutely. But it's like they know it really matters when the playoffs start.
Yeah, and they're going for that unprecedented three-peat. And as you said, they have the championship DNA. They are finding ways to win. I know last week you and I didn't get talk, but you know, by all rights, they were done. They blocked the kick great thing they saw on film or something. Their special teams unit there by Dave Tobbs and his guys. But yeah, kind of living on the edge. And I think, it's almost better for them to lose a game because you still remember in '07, the Patriots had that undefeated streak and it was kind of hanging over their head. The last team to uh, have the most wins and be undefeated and finish the job was the 2006 Colts. So, I think, yeah, the Chiefs will still be in the mix, but Buffalo's not afraid of them. And then you have the Steelers, who are kind of sneaky, 8-2. And Mike Tomlin, as we know, they're trying to get that number one seed as well, and that possibly could happen. So good win for the Bills. They shut down Travis Kelsey, only 2 catches for 8 yards in this game. He was getting vultured over and over again by Gray, and of course I have Travis Kelsey on on my team. I was like, Gray's getting all these touchdowns, but I think that the Chiefs will. They'll bounce back, particularly this week. They have Carolina. Good luck, Carolina. I think they're going to really put that on them. But the Bills go into their bye, um, as I said, at 9-2, and they're feeling real good at this point. But a lot of tough games for both teams. When you look at the upcoming schedule for them, Bills have their bye. Then they have San Francisco, at the Rams, at Detroit, New England, the Jets, New England. So the end of their season may help them out, but they have some tough games coming up after their bye. Kansas City, they're going to try to get right. As I said, at Carolina, they have the Raiders who are falling apart. They have the Chargers at the Browns, Houston, at Pittsburgh, at Denver. So some winnable games, some tougher games in the mix for the Kansas City Chiefs. And as you said, they need to stop being cute. You know what I mean? Just do the basics. Stop trying to do all the formations. And that's the thing with Andy Reid. Sometimes he overthinks it. That was his problem a lot of times at Philadelphia. He does have the playmakers. I think with D Hop being there, it's definitely helped that offense, and they're trying to get Worthy involved. The calling card though has been Spags' defense, and they had their tough time with Josh Allen and that group. And in terms of the Bills, talk to me about the job that Cook's doing. I mean, he is running extremely hard.
Yeah, he is. I mean, it's a different team without him, that's for sure. Because you sat there, you lost your wide receivers, you lost Diggs, you lost Gabe Davis. Shakir's done a nice job for him as well. But without the running back situation, I mean, that and the kid that got behind him, Davis, is good. He just can't get the touches right now. That's how much Cook is eating it up right now. And he's a problem. He is a problem out there. You have to identify him, and you got to keep an eye on him because him alone can take him down the field.
Yeah, and so we'll see how they're going from here. And good win for them. And we'll get to the other team in this division, and the Colts 5-6 over the New York Jets, who are now 3-8. Last week, Nate and I were forking teams. You definitely got to stick a fork in the New York Jets. Their season's over. Joe Douglas, he's going to be in trouble. Uh, it's crazy. Ulbricht's an interim coach, and he may be in trouble too. Maybe they'll fire him and try somebody else. But the Jets are just a dumpster fire. And the other side of it, Richardson comes back and plays quarterback for the Colts. Had a very nice game, 20 of 30, 272. Had a TD passing and then 2 rushing touchdowns. The thing is, I see some foreshadowing with Richards. I mean, Richardson. He's putting that shoulder down, banging over a lot of people, and I just think it's a matter of time before he gets hurt. So talk about this game and what you think in terms of Richardson for the Colts.
I mean, Richardson's a big guy, and he's struggled at times throwing the ball. I mean, there was a couple passes earlier in the year. It was like the ball didn't stay on the field, but then he throws a pass off his back foot and lands a dime 40 yards down the field. I think he's just at the point right now where it's like, especially after being benched too, and we've realized that Flacco really is like 60
Yeah.
years old. They had to put him back in. But you sit there and he's like, I'm just trying to win right now. Is it the smartest way for him to play? Absolutely not. But he's trying to get results. He's trying to stay in there and be the starting quarterback for this team, and he's trying to win games.
Yeah, and a good quality win for the Colts. They're now 5-6. The Jets, you start wondering, should they bench Aaron Rodgers? That would be great. I would love to see his
Oh,
face
yeah.
if they took him out and put Tyrod Taylor in there. And
And God
You know,
forbid they win. They win the game with Tyrod Taylor. That would be fantastic.
yeah, and he's the be all end all, and he's the egomaniac, and he got everything his way. He got Devontae Adams, all these crony guys, on his team. Alan Lazard, who's on IR, and some other guys. But the Jets are just underachieving this season. That defense is playing well at times, but they're allowing teams to move the football. Particularly, Sauce Gardner is not having a great season for them on the corner, and change is coming for the Jets. I think they're going to blow that thing up. We're coming down the home stretch here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coastal Sports Network. Want to get your quick take on this one. Miami Dolphins now are 4-6. The Raiders are pitiful. They beat the Raiders 34-19. But the thing is, Tua has come back and has looked real efficient, getting the ball out of his hands. They have 2 wins in a row, Miami, and possibly they're getting back to the mix. So, what do you think about the Dolphins and Tua?
I think everyone who has Tyreek Hill on their fantasy team is very happy right now. I've been sitting all year waiting for him to actually put some points up. I, the jury's still out with Miami. If they can string a couple more wins together and become more relevant in the playoff mix, we'll see where they're at. But it helps them with Tua out there. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and Tua had a nice game. Um, Next week, Miami is uh, New England is at Miami. So yeah, you're talking about winnable games for them, and maybe they can get back in the playoff mix. And they just have so many weapons. Particularly Chan is playing great for them,
Mhm.
and they got to. We'll see if they're able to pick this up, but they need Tua. Tua's their guy. As long as he can avoid the concussion, um, this team can be kind of in the mix. So last game we're going to touch on before we get to next week's games here on Lloyd Vance Inside Football. The Saints just dominate the Browns 35-14. That's not really what I want to talk about. Taysom Hill.
Yeah.
He is the modern day Jim Thorpe. I mean, he's just a football player. I mean, this guy, 7 rushes, 138 yards, 3 TDs. He had 8 receptions for 50 yards. He threw a pass, it was intercepted, but I mean, this guy was everywhere for the Saints in this victory.
Yeah, I remember it was 2 years ago, and it was like fantasy, and my tight end was on a buy, and I was like,
Yes.
I'll buy the scratch off ticket. I'll take Taysom Hill, whatever. What's it gonna hurt? He hung like 28 points for me. It was like, oh my god, he scored like 2 rushing touchdowns. He threw a touchdown. It was unbelievable, and he's fun to watch.
Yeah. And I could hear the guy you played, and I heard the same thing when I go, he's not a tight end. He shouldn't get those
Yeah.
points. Well, guess what? He does. And ESPN says he's a tight end. So when he throws a touchdown or rushes for it, he gets a little added bonus. I mean, he's a credible player. I mean, and the crazy thing is, he's 34 years old. He came from
Mhm.
BYU. He was on a mission before, he came to the NFL, and a great win for the Saints. And he's a fun guy to watch. We'll jump to each week here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football. We give our game balls and our lackey. I'll go first. I mean, there were some good choices in terms of game ball. We just talked about Taysom Hill, but Josh Allen, I had to give it to him. What a great victory for him in terms of beating the formerly unbeaten the Chiefs. He is my game ball winner for this week.
I'm going to do this as a two-parter. One, I'm giving it to Bo Nix. I mean, the way he played against Atlanta was awesome. I'm giving an early shout out to Joe Mixon tonight. Joe
Oh,
Mixon, I'm not going to go into big details here, but one of us on the panel might have Joe Mixon on their fantasy team and was down 20 points already and needed to get some points tonight. Joe Mixon with 2 touchdowns and over 18 points in the first quarter already against Dallas is hanging some numbers tonight. So, Mr. Joe Mixon, thank you.
and it's funny because I'm playing Nate and I'm way down. I had to pick up a quarterback, and I picked up Stroud, and Nico Collins is back. So, but I'm pretty far behind. I'm like 70 points behind. I need a big night from those Texans, and then when you talk about the other side, Dallas Cowboys, they're the new homecoming team. It's embarrassing. So, all right, Josh Allen, and then good picks there by Kevin. My lackey, I got to give it to Doug Peterson. I know Dougie P. You got the statue outside of Lincoln Financial Field. Sorry, buddy. 4 straight lost. I mean, your team was embarrassed, 52-6. You've lost 14 last 17. I got to give you the lackey. Sorry.
I am actually going to ride your coattails on this one. I am going to include everybody on the Jacksonville Jaguars football franchise except Brian Thomas Jr. and Tank Bigsby, who was hurt. The rest of that team, they are horrible. They are wretched. You got another case of somebody getting paid like Trevor Lawrence did before the injury, has not lived up to it, and they're just really bad.
They are. They are. They're embarrassing, and it's crazy because you said Trevor Lawrence. They paid him. He's happy. Probably happy. Like, my shoulder's hurt. I'm going to sit this one out, coach. It's great.
Hmm.
You know. And then you got Mac Jones, total retread, and he flamed out with the Patriots. He didn't play that bad, but this team's falling apart. ATN is just not the same player he was, and they have some names, but Jacksonville's 2-9. Shad Khan, their owner, he's kind of absent all the time. He's overseas a lot, and uh, I think if it was them up to him, the team would be in London full time. So, a lot of changes coming to Jacksonville, but yeah, they definitely are a good lackey pick. All right, we're coming down the stretch here in Lloyd Vance's Insider Football. We're going to look ahead to Week 12 around the National Football League. Thursday night, the Pittsburgh Steelers 8-2. They're playing the Cleveland Browns 3-8. We've got to talk about the comeback of Jameis Winston. he went. He started for the Browns against the Saints. Same results as always with Jameis. Some good, some bad. But uh, I think the Browns are in trouble with the Steelers coming in town. We talked about T.J. Watt and how aggressive he's been playing. The Browns line's pretty beat up, so I expect the Steelers to win this one.
I agree. The only thing that could help the Browns out is the hangover effect from beating Baltimore by Pittsburgh. Because every now and then, a team's ready to throw a clunker in there, especially on a short week. So that's the only thing I think that can play into Cleveland's fortune.
Yeah. This next game we're looking at here in Lloyd Vance Inside Football in Week 12 is, Kansas City. We won't spend a lot of time. Kansas City is going to get right. They're going to Carolina. I expect Patrick Mahomes to have a big game, and it'll probably be designing plays, and they'll be playing tag before a snap and all that fun stuff. But I think the Chiefs are going to win a laugher against the Panthers this week.
I think we're going to get some Carson Wentz time. I think it's time to get some Carson Wentz
Oh,
time out
yeah.
there. So we'll see how that plays out. I mean, if Carolina beat Kansas City, that would shock the world, and Vegas would win a lot of money. So I do not foresee that after a loss against Buffalo. So yeah, they should be fine.
Yeah. All right, Minnesota Vikings 8-2, and you're starting to wonder, are they for real? They're going to play the Chicago Bears. Obviously, the Bears have Stevenson and Sweat on defense. They have some names on that defense, but it's. I think Caleb Williams is going to make some mistakes in this one, and he didn't play bad last week, but they just can't seem to find a running game. Offensive line not very good for the Bears. I think the Vikings win this one. I think Jefferson makes some big plays in it.
I think the Bears are just a pain in the butt. It's like a division game. I mean, look at Green Bay. They sat there. They lost like 2 games in a row by more than 20 points. Green Bay's coming off a bye, and they made Green Bay sweat out the game at the very end. It's like you just get those division matchups sometimes. You're in a headlock and you can't get out of it.
Yeah, so they'll probably hang around, and then maybe Williams make a mistake here or there. Harrison Smith or somebody get a pick on them, but I expect the Vikings to win this one. Now you do have an indoor team going outside, and that's always kind of tricky. But I think the Vikings win this one, stay in the mix um, behind the Detroit Lions. You have Tennessee 2-8 at the Houston Texans. You talked about earlier. Texans are just. I think they're getting right against Dallas Cowboys, and they're probably going to continue against the hapless Tennessee Titans. Last week the Titans quarterback actually didn't play too bad. But what do you think of this about this one?
I think you start and end with Will Levis. I don't see Will Levis doing anything. I mean, for Will Levis, who did play a little better last week, it's still not that good. So I just think Tennessee is that's another one of those franchises you almost need to just start over again. I mean, with everything they have right there, Pollard, I mean Calvin Ridley, a receiver, nothing's popping.
Yeah, and Callahan's a coach. He's in his first season. He's yelling and screaming at everybody, and they have some pieces on defense, but yeah, a lot to clean up there for the Tennessee Titans. The Detroit Lions 9-1. They're going to the Indianapolis Colts. We talked about Richardson kind of coming back from injury and taking over for Flacco. This game's in Indianapolis, but I expect Detroit to start rolling it up, and everybody's starting to talk about Detroit losing Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, their defensive coordinator, next season. But I think the Lions are all in. They're trying to get to Detroit's first Super Bowl.
Detroit not even last week, yesterday, they reminded me of Barry Switzer's Oklahoma teams that just sat there and wanted to rout somebody and just keep pouring it on them the whole time. It was like they were trying to improve their ranking and Bobby Bowden would do that at Florida State and Osborne at Nebraska. It's like, let's hang 50 or 60 on this team right here. And that's just how good they are right now. I mean, even when they're trying to pull it back, they end up scoring.
Yeah, and they've had a great season, and we're going to see if they're able to keep that going. And Detroit is my pick to play Kansas City in the Super Bowl. It's looking like that, but typically, you get one of these favorites, they're not going to get to the big game, but Detroit's trying hard, and it's going to be interesting if they have that NFC Championship game there in Detroit. The fans will probably be going nuts, so that would be a fun one to watch. All right, go through some of these other ones. The Niners, 5-5 at the Green Bay Packers, kind of a prove it game, back and forth on picking this one. The game's in Green Bay, so I think that'll factor in. And obviously, as I said, the window may be closing on the Niners, and I just think the Packers may win this one. Very close game for them once again. And don't forget about the Niners. Talking about kickers earlier, Moody is terrible for the Niners, so I say he misses a kick.
San Francisco, I think if they lose this game, they're just going to spiral at this point because you got to think about tiebreakers and everything else if you're not going to win the division trying to get in the postseason. And they need this game. They need this game probably more than any other team this week coming up.
Yeah, they do, and so they're going to need Purdy to be efficient. They're going to need George Kittle out there, and they're going to need Debo to make some more plays than he did yesterday. So that's going to be a fun one to watch. That's a 4 o'clock, 4:25 start on Fox. You have Arizona going to Seattle, and I say to everybody, the NFC West, you could throw all these teams in a bag, and one team will beat the other this week, and next week it exchange. But you have Arizona. We were talking about them earlier. At Seattle, but I just think Seattle, they seem to kind of turn the corner yesterday. And as long as good Geno shows up, I think Arizona comes back down to earth. And then all these teams are tied at 6-5, and you wonder who's going to win the division.
Yeah, just to stay true to myself here, just for Nate, I'm taking Seattle. I got to have this Kyler Murray thing not pan out at some point. And like I said, I've been undervaluing Geno Smith. So let's see what happens if I rise. I'll take Seattle.
Yeah, interesting with good Kyler was around last week. He only missed like one or two passes, and everybody's like, man, stick him in MVP conversation. But he's still too little for my taste. There's always a play where ball gets batted back in his face or something. And you said about like we did with the Eagles. The true MVP to me for the Cardinals right now is James Conner. I mean, he's had a resurgence. He's running angry out there. So, you know, we'll see how Arizona does. Prove a game against Seattle. Big game in a Sunday night football matchup. Wanted to get Kevin's take on this. The Philadelphia Eagles are 8-2, and Angel and Kevin have heard me week after. Oh, they haven't played nobody. Everybody's getting a little ahead of themselves with the Eagles, but Eagles 8-2, huge game. They're playing in Los Angeles against the Rams. They're back and forth on this one. I think the Rams may win it. So, what are you thinking about this game? Eagles at the Rams.
I think it's going to be one of those games. There's going to be more Eagles fans at that game than Rams fans. I think the Eagles
Yeah.
fans travel and they're going to take over that stadium. The Rams they're clicking right now, and it's going to be the test. I really think is how well that Eagles defense is playing, whether they can get pressure on Stafford. That's kind of one of the things I'm looking for in this game. See if they're for real against a real offense.
Yeah, and the Rams' offensive line is, they've had some injuries, and that group up front's not the best. So the Eagles, if it's time to start getting some sacks, particularly out of Sweat and Huff and Carter and the rest of those guys, it's against this Rams team. But Stafford's played very well, and they're going to have to find a way to figure out him and Kyron Williams, and don't forget about Nakua and Cup. So it's a fast track indoors at SoFi, so it's going to be a fun game to watch Sunday Night Football. I will go with the Rams. I think it's going to be a close one, but I think the Eagles fans, as you said, they would travel well. The Monday night football game is the Ravens at the Chargers. We didn't get to the Chargers. Chargers are slowly putting a season together. They had a big win last night. Um, Ravens, this is a huge game for them, and this is a situation where Lamar Jackson usually shines. The game will actually be out there at SoFi Stadium as well. It's a Chargers home team, so I'll go with the Ravens in a close game, and maybe Tucker gets right and hits a game-winning field goal.
I think if you would have said before the season that the Chargers and Broncos would be battling for playoff spots, we would have been like, Chargers maybe, Harbaugh's first year, Denver no way. And both teams right now are lining up well. That's not going to be an easy win for Baltimore as also. So they're going to have to, bring the A game coming off a loss because one loss turns into two losses quick, and next thing you know, you're falling down the list.
Yeah. Another great week here in Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029, the Coast Sports Network. Great job, Kevin, on the other side, talking a lot of topics. Angel doing a great job behind the glass. Appreciate everybody being with us, and we will talk to you next week.